My daughter-in-law gave me memory vitamins every day. One day I passed out and woke up in the hospital. She claimed I was there because I had lost my mind, right up until the doctor walked into my room and whispered to my son, "You need to know the truth about your wife." He froze when he heard the truth. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from. That way, I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Rose, and I am 64 years old. I never thought the day would come when I would doubt my own mind, when I would question every thought, every memory. It all started 6 months ago, when my daughter-in-law Ashley became so overly concerned about my health. I have lived with my son Daniel and his wife for 2 years, after selling my house to help them with the down payment on theirs. It was a decision I made out of love, thinking it would be beautiful to be close to the family I loved so much. Daniel had always been my golden boy, the most attentive of my 3 children. And Ashley seemed like the perfect daughter-in-law when they got married 5 years ago. Things started to change so subtly that I didn't even notice at first. Ashley began pointing out little memory slips, saying I had left the stove on when I was certain I had turned it off, that I was repeating the same stories when I didn't remember telling them before, that I was putting my keys in weird places. "Rose," she would say to me with that sweet smile of hers, "I think you should start taking better care of yourself. At our age, the memory needs extra help." At first, it bothered me that she referred to our age when she was barely 32 years old, but I decided not to make a fuss. Families should live in harmony, I told myself. That was when the vitamins appeared. My pharmacist recommended these special capsules, Ashley explained to me one morning, placing a bottle of blue pills on the breakfast table. They are super effective for the memories of older adults. My aunt took them and lived to be 95 with a mind as clear as crystal. The pills had no label. They just came in a generic white plastic bottle. When I asked about the name or the ingredients, Ashley assured me they were all natural, a special blend of herbs and vitamins that wasn't sold in regular pharmacies. "You have to take them every day, always at the same time," she insisted. "Consistency is key for them to work." Daniel completely supported his wife's initiative. "Mom, Ashley just wants what's best for you. You should be thankful she cares so much." I started taking them because I didn't want to cause trouble in the house. 1 blue pill every morning with breakfast. Religiously, Ashley made sure I never forgot them, bringing them to me personally with a glass of orange juice. At first, I didn't notice anything strange, but after a few weeks, something changed. I felt foggy, like there was a constant mist in my mind that I couldn't clear away. Names escaped me. Dates I knew perfectly well became confusing, and sometimes I found myself standing in a room without remembering what I had gone in there for. "See?" Ashley would say with feigned concern when I made these little mistakes. "Good thing you started on the vitamins in time. Imagine how you would be without them." The episodes gradually worsened. One morning, I woke up and couldn't remember what day it was. Another time, I went to the grocery store and completely froze in the cereal aisle, utterly lost. An older woman had to help me find the exit. Daniel noticed my decline with a mix of sadness and resignation that broke my heart. "Mom, maybe you should see a doctor," he suggested one night during dinner. "She's already taking the vitamins," Ashley interrupted quickly. "The problem is she doesn't take them consistently. Sometimes she forgets, and I have to remind her." That wasn't true. I never forgot to take them because Ashley always made sure of it. But when I tried to correct her, my voice sounded weak and unsure. "I don't. I always take them." See what I mean? Ashley looked at Daniel with that "I told you so" expression she had perfected. Her memory is getting worse. The feeling of losing my sanity was terrifying. At night, I would lie awake trying to hold on to clear memories, repeating important dates, the names of my grandchildren, trying to keep my mind anchored to reality. But every day, it got harder. I started to distrust my own perceptions. Had I really locked the door? Had I paid the electric bill? Or did I just think I did? Uncertainty became my constant companion. Ashley became increasingly protective, limiting my outings and visits. "We don't want you getting lost or hurt," she would say with genuine concern in her voice. "It's better if you stay home where you're safe." Daniel agreed with everything his wife suggested. My son, the man who once defended my decisions against anyone, now treated me like a fragile child who needed constant supervision. One afternoon, while Ashley was at work, I tried to call my sister Carol to tell her what was happening. But when I dialed her number, my mind went totally blank. I couldn't remember what I wanted to say to her. The words faded before I could even form the sentences. I hung up the phone, trembling. This was dementia. Alzheimer's. The possibility filled me with a terror so deep I felt like I was drowning. That night, during dinner, Ashley noticed my mood. "Rose, you seem upset. Did you take your vitamin today?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure of anything anymore. "Maybe you need a slightly stronger dose," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "I'll talk to my pharmacist tomorrow." Daniel looked up from his plate. "Do you think she's getting worse?" The look they exchanged chilled my blood. It was the look of spouses sharing a secret, a decision made without consulting me. Tuesday morning, October 25th, will be a day I can never forget. Even though at the time, my memory felt like quicksand. I had spent a terrible night, waking up every hour with a sense of panic I couldn't explain. My body felt strange, heavy, as if it didn't completely belong to me. Ashley brought me the vitamin as usual, along with the orange juice. This time, the pill looked slightly different, a little bigger and a deeper blue. "It's the new formula," she explained when I grimaced, swallowing it. "My pharmacist says it will be much more effective for cases like yours, cases like mine." The words echoed in my head strangely. I was becoming a case, a problem to be solved. Half an hour after breakfast, while trying to wash the dishes, I felt the world start to move slowly around me. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped a glass. The sink looked blurry, as if I were looking at it through muddy water. "Ashley," I called out with a weak voice, "I feel weird." She appeared immediately, as if she had been waiting for my call. "What's wrong, Rose? You look very pale." "I don't know. Everything is spinning." The words slurred out of my mouth. My legs felt like jelly, and I gripped the edge of the counter. "Daniel!" Ashley yelled toward the stairs. "Come quick! Your mom isn't feeling well." What followed is a confusing blur of voices, movement, and a sensation of floating outside my own body. I vaguely remember being on the kitchen floor with Daniel and Ashley leaning over me. Their voices sounded like they were coming from far away. "She's very confused," I heard Ashley telling someone on the phone. "Yes, she's been getting worse the last few weeks." "No. She didn't even recognize her own son a little while ago." That wasn't true. I did recognize Daniel, but my mind was too cloudy to protest. The trip to the hospital happened in a haze. I remember being on a stretcher, with bright lights passing over my head like shooting stars. Daniel was by my side, holding my hand, but his face looked distorted, worried. "You're going to be okay, Mom," he murmured. "We're going to take care of you." At the hospital, everything became a whirlwind of questions, forms, and tests. My mind drifted in and out like a badly tuned radio. Sometimes I could hear the conversations clearly. Other times, the voices turned into an incomprehensible mumble. Dr. Mitchell, an older man with a gray beard, spoke with Daniel and Ashley in the hallway. I pretended to be asleep so I could listen. "Her behavior has been very erratic lately," Ashley explained, her voice cracking with fake emotion. "She forgets basic things. She gets lost in the house. Sometimes she doesn't recognize us. Yesterday, she tried to leave for work in her pajamas, but she's been retired for 3 years. My heart sank. That hadn't happened either, but it sounded so convincing coming from her. "Has there been any aggression?" the doctor asked. "Yes," Ashley answered immediately. "Last night she pushed me when I tried to help her into bed. Daniel had to intervene." "That's not true," I whispered. But my voice was so weak no one heard me. Daniel confirmed his wife's story with a sorrowful nod. "Doctor, my mother was always a very independent, strong woman. Seeing her fall apart like this is devastating." "I understand," Dr. Mitchell said with professional compassion. "Considering the symptoms you describe and her current state, I recommend she be admitted for a full psychiatric evaluation. We need to determine if we are dealing with a case of senile dementia or an organic mental disorder." The words hit me like sledgehammers. Psychiatric hold? Dementia. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that something didn't add up, but my body was too weak to fight. "How long?" Daniel asked. A minimum 7-2-hour hold for the initial evaluation, possibly more depending on the results. Ashley sobbed softly. It's what's best for her, right? We can't keep taking care of her at home if she's going to be a danger to herself or to us. I understand this is a difficult decision. The doctor placed a comforting hand on Daniel's shoulder. But you are doing the right thing by seeking professional help. Your mother needs specialized care. That night, as I lay in a hospital bed with bars on the windows, the reality of my situation hit me hard. My own son had authorized my admission into a psychiatric hospital. The woman who had given birth to him, who had sacrificed everything for her children, was now considered a threat. A kind young nurse named Sarah came in to check my vitals. How are you feeling, Rose? Confused, I admitted honestly. I don't understand what's happening to me. She looked at me gently. Sometimes our bodies and minds just need rest. You'll be well taken care of here. But I didn't feel well taken care of. I felt betrayed, abandoned by the family I had loved unconditionally. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I stared at the white hospital ceiling, wondering how I had gotten to this point. Was I really losing my mind, or was there something more sinister behind all of this? In the darkness of that sterile room, a tiny voice deep in my mind whispered something that made my blood run cold. The vitamins. But that voice was so faint, so uncertain, that I dismissed it as just another symptom of my supposed insanity. I didn't know that the next day, my world would change forever. The third day in the psychiatric ward changed everything. Not because something dramatic happened immediately, but because something crucial stopped happening. I was no longer taking Ashley's vitamins. The first morning without them, I woke up feeling strangely present. It was as if a thick fog I didn't even know was there slowly began to lift from my mind. The outlines of the room looked sharper. The sounds were clearer. During the morning evaluation, Dr. Harrison, a young psychiatrist assigned to my case, asked me the routine questions. Do you know what day it is today, Rose? Friday, October 28th, I replied without hesitation. It was the first time in weeks I was completely sure of a date. He raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised. And the name of the current president? I answered all of his questions correctly. I could remember my full address, the names of my 3 children, even my sister Carol's phone number, which I hadn't dialed in months. Interesting, Dr. Harrison murmured, taking notes. Your answers are completely lucid. How are you feeling physically? Better, I admitted, surprised by my own mental clarity. It's like I've been in some kind of fog, and I can finally see. That afternoon, Daniel and Ashley came to visit me. Ashley wore her perfectly rehearsed smile and carried a small bag in her hands. Hi, mother-in-law, she said with fake sweetness. How are you feeling? I brought you your vitamins. I talked to the doctor, and he said you could keep taking them here. My heart raced. Something inside me, an intuition I hadn't felt in months, screamed at me not to take them. No, I said firmly. I don't want to take them today. Ashley blinked, clearly thrown off. But Rose, you need to keep up the routine. Without them, your memory will get worse. I feel better without them, I insisted, surprised by the strength of my own voice. Daniel stepped closer to my bed. Mom, Ashley knows what's best for you. She's been doing a lot of research on these natural treatments. Daniel, I said, looking directly into my son's eyes. Do you remember when you were 8 years old and you broke your arm falling off the blue bike I got you for your birthday? I took you to Street, Joseph's hospital, and we waited 4 hours in the ER because there had been a pileup on the highway. My son's jaw dropped. Mom, how do you remember all those details? Because my memory is perfectly fine, I replied with a clarity that surprised even me, and it always has been. Ashley stiffened. The hospital medications must be interacting with your system. That's why you're confused about what's real and what isn't. But something had shifted in me. The fog had cleared enough for me to see the holes in her story, the little lies I had been too confused to question before. Ashley, I said slowly, you never gave me the name of your pharmacist. I never saw a prescription for those vitamins. And now that I think about it, I never saw the pharmacy where you supposedly bought them. Her face tightened almost imperceptibly. That doesn't matter right now, Rose. The important thing is that you get better. I want to speak with Dr. Harrison, I announced. I want to tell him about the vitamins. There's nothing to tell, Ashley rushed to say. They're natural supplements, completely safe. But Daniel had noticed something in my tone, in my sudden lucidity. "What vitamins?" he asked, looking at his wife. "I thought they were prescribed medications." A tense silence filled the room. Ashley opened and closed her mouth, clearly searching for an explanation. That was when Dr. Harrison walked in for his afternoon rounds. He was a man in his mid-30s with a neatly trimmed beard and intelligent eyes that missed no detail. "Good afternoon. How are we doing today, Rose?" "Doctor," I said before Ashley could interrupt. "I need to tell you about some vitamins I've been taking. My daughter-in-law says they're natural, but since I stopped taking them here, my mind is much clearer." "Doctor," Harrison turned to me with renewed interest. "Can you describe these vitamins to me? Blue pills, no label, in a generic white bottle. I've taken them every morning for the last 6 months." Ashley stepped forward quickly. "Doctor, they're just herbal supplements, nothing important." But Dr. Harrison ignored her completely, focusing on me. "And when did you start experiencing the symptoms of confusion?" "About 2 weeks after I started taking them." His eyes hardened. "Do you have any of these vitamins with you?" he asked, turning to Ashley. No, I forgot them at home," she lied awkwardly. "How convenient," the doctor murmured, taking quick notes. "Rose, I'm going to order some additional blood work, specific toxicology screens." Ashley's face went completely pale. "Toxicology screens? Doctor, that is completely unnecessary. They're just natural vitamins." "If they're just natural vitamins, doctor," Harrison said with a cold smile, "then the tests won't show anything to worry about, will they?" Daniel looked totally confused, glancing from his wife to his mother and back to the doctor. "What is going on here, doctor?" Harrison stepped closer to Daniel, lowering his voice, but not enough that I couldn't hear. "Sir, your mother has shown a remarkable cognitive improvement since she was admitted. Her initial symptoms are not consistent with senile dementia or an organic mental disorder. In fact, they suggest something entirely different." "Like what?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Like systematic pharmacological intoxication." The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Daniel staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. "That's ridiculous." Ashley defended herself, but her voice was high-pitched, desperate. "Rose is confused. She's been getting worse for months." "No," I said firmly. "I've been getting better ever since I stopped taking your vitamins." Dr. Harrison looked at me with an expression that mixed professionalism with something akin to admiration. "Rose, the blood tests will give us definitive answers. In the meantime, I want you to know that your current lucidity is completely normal and coherent." Daniel slumped into the chair next to my bed, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "Mom, are you saying Ashley has been poisoning you?" I finished the sentence he couldn't quite bear to say. "Yes, son, that is exactly what I am saying." The test results came back 2 days later. When Dr. Harrison walked into my room that Sunday morning, his expression was a mix of professional outrage and satisfaction that he had trusted his instincts. "Rose," he said, closing the door behind him, "I need to speak with you before your son and daughter-in-law arrive." My heart raced. "What did you find?" He sat in the chair beside my bed, holding a folder with lab results. "Benzodiazepines in significant levels. Specifically, lorazepam and diazepam. In doses that, if administered daily over months, would perfectly explain all the symptoms you experienced." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Those are potent sedatives, medications used to treat severe anxiety. In high doses, they can cause exactly what you described: confusion, short-term memory loss, disorientation, physical weakness." His voice hardened. "Someone has been systematically administering these drugs to you, disguising them as vitamins." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. I wasn't crazy. I didn't have dementia. I had been poisoned by my own daughter-in-law. "Doctor," I whispered, It means you have been the victim of a deliberate and systematic poisoning. This is a serious felony. Rose, we need to call the authorities." Before I could answer, I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Daniel and Ashley had arrived for their daily visit. Do you want us to confront them together? Dr. Harrison asked. I nodded, feeling a mix of terror and determination. It was time for the truth to come to light. When Daniel and Ashley walked in, they immediately noticed the tension in the room. Dr. Harrison stood by my bed, the lab results in his hands. Good morning, Ashley said with her rehearsed smile, but I could see the nervousness in her eyes. How is our favorite patient doing today? Ashley, Dr. Harrison said without preamble. I need to ask you some questions about the vitamins you've been giving your mother-in-law. Daniel stepped closer. Vitamins. What about them? The doctor held up the papers. Your mother's toxicology reports show significant levels of benzodiazepines in her system, specifically lorazepam and diazepam. Daniel frowned. I don't understand what that means. It means, the doctor said with a terrifying calm, that someone has been giving your mother potent sedatives for months, disguised as vitamin supplements. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel slowly turned to his wife, his face a mask of disbelief and growing horror. Ashley, he said, his voice trembling. What vitamins were you giving my mother? I don't know what he's talking about, Ashley stammered, all the color draining from her face. They were natural vitamins, just like I always told you. Benzodiazepines are not natural vitamins, Dr. Harrison said firmly. They are controlled substances that require a prescription, and the levels in Rose's system indicate constant, deliberate administration. Daniel took a step back, looking at his wife as if seeing her for the very first time. Ashley, please, tell me this isn't true. Of course it's not true, Ashley yelled, but her voice cracked. This is a conspiracy to make me look bad. Rose is confused. The doctor is confused. Blood tests don't lie, Dr. Harrison interrupted. And there's something else you need to know. He pulled another sheet of paper from the folder. I did some digging after getting these results. Your wife, Daniel, is not a pharmacist like she told you. In fact, she was fired from her job at a clinic 8 months ago for stealing controlled medications. My world tilted. What? Daniel turned to Ashley, wild-eyed. Is that true? Ashley was visibly shaking now. Daniel, I can explain. Explain what? My son roared, with a fury I had never seen in him. Explain why you've been drugging my mother? Explain why you lied about your job? Because we needed the money, Ashley sobbed, finally breaking under the pressure. And she has the house. She has savings. My blood ran cold. What savings? Daniel turned to me, confused. Mom, what savings? The $50,000 I have in my savings account, I said slowly. The money I was going to leave as an inheritance for the three of you. Ashley let out a sound that was part sob, part hysterical laugh. They aren't there anymore, Rose, Daniel staggered. What do you mean they aren't there anymore? We needed the money for the house debt, Ashley screamed, completely losing control. And she was going to die soon anyway. She was going to be demented. It was easier this way. The horror on Daniel's face was indescribable. Are you telling me that you stole my mother's money? And you were poisoning her to make it look like she had dementia? It wasn't poisoning, Ashley protested desperately. It was just to keep her calm, so she wouldn't ask questions. And then what? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady given the fury I felt. What was your ultimate plan, Ashley? She looked at me with wild eyes, all pretense of innocence finally abandoned. You were going to have an accident, she whispered. A fall down the stairs is very common in older people with dementia. Daniel let out a sound that was half groan, half scream. He lunged toward his wife, but Dr. Harrison stopped him. Sir, please, this is a matter for the police now. As if waiting for that cue, 2 police officers walked into the room. Doctor, Harrison had called the authorities before the confrontation. Ashley, one of the officers said, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning, elder abuse, and financial fraud. As they handcuffed Ashley, she looked at me with a mix of hatred and desperation. It was my money, too. I'm part of this family, aren't I? You were never part of this family, I said firmly, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in months. Families do not poison each other. Daniel collapsed into the chair, head in his hands, sobbing. Mom, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I looked at my son, the man who had authorized my psychiatric hold, who had believed his wife's lies over his own mother. The damage was done, but I now understood that he, too, had been a victim of Ashley's manipulation. But forgiveness, I thought, would be something we'd have to rebuild together, step by step. The truth had finally come to light, but I knew this was only the beginning of a long road to healing. The weeks following Ashley's arrest were the hardest of my life, and that's saying a lot for a 4-year-old woman who has been through divorces, the deaths of loved ones, and raising 3 kids as a single mother for years. Dr. Harrison kept me under observation for 3 more days to make sure the drugs were completely out of my system. During those 72 hours, I experienced what he called mild withdrawal, headaches, insomnia, and moments of intense anxiety as my body got used to functioning without the sedatives Ashley had been slipping me. "It's completely normal," the doctor assured me during one of our sessions. "Your body had developed a physical dependence on these substances. The important thing is that your mind is completely intact." Daniel came every day, but our conversations were tense, filled with uncomfortable silences and unspoken words. The weight of his guilt was tearing him apart inside. I could see it in his hollow eyes, in the way he shrank when he looked at me, as if he expected me to strike him. "Mom," he said on the 4th day after I was discharged, "I don't know how to ask for your forgiveness. I don't know if there's a word in the English language for what I feel." We were sitting in my old bedroom at his house, surrounded by the belongings I had hastily packed. I had decided to move in temporarily with my sister Carol while I figured out what to do with my life. "Daniel," I told him, choosing my words carefully, "you were a victim of Ashley too. She manipulated you just like she did me, but I should have known." His hands trembled as he spoke. "You're my mother. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned why you got so much better when she wasn't around." He was right, partly, but yelling at him wouldn't do any good now. Instead, I decided to be honest about how I felt. "It hurts that you didn't trust me," I admitted. "It hurts that you believed I was capable of becoming violent or dangerous. But what hurts the most is that when I started questioning the vitamins, you immediately took her side." Daniel broke down then, a deep, gut-wrenching cry that seemed to come from the very bottom of his soul. "She convinced me you were getting paranoid. She said it was part of the disease, that patients always blame their caregivers." And I believed her. Because it was easier to believe that than to face the possibility that you were really sick. I understood then that Daniel had been dealing with his own fear and pain. Watching a parent age is terrifying for any adult child, and Ashley had exploited that fear expertly. "Did you know about the money?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from his expression. "Of course not," he cried. "I never knew she touched your savings. I thought we had been living off our incomes, even if things were tight. When you asked me about the house debt, I didn't know what you were talking about because we always paid the mortgage on time." The following days were a bureaucratic nightmare. I had to work with a lawyer to recover what was left of my $50,000. It turned out Ashley had blown $32,000 on online gambling and credit card debts that Daniel knew absolutely nothing about. The remaining $18,000 were frozen by the bank as part of the criminal investigation. It could take months to get that money back, my lawyer, Mr. Vance, explained to me. "But we have a solid case. Plus, you can sue for emotional distress and medical expenses." I didn't want to sue. I just wanted my money back and to move on with my life. Carol, my younger sister, was my lifeline during those weeks. Her house in the Riverside neighborhood had a cozy guest room with a view of the garden she had cultivated for 20 years. Waking up every morning to see her roses and geraniums was a small blessing I didn't know I needed. I always knew there was something off about that woman, Carol confided in me one afternoon while we drank tea in her kitchen. The way she talked to you like you were a child, and that fake smile, it gave me the creeps. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. Carol sighed. "Because you seemed so happy to be close to Daniel, and I thought maybe I was just being overprotective of you after everything you went through with Robert." Robert was my ex-husband, the father of my children, a man who had also had manipulative tendencies, though never to the point of poisoning me. Carol had a right to be protective. "Besides," she continued, "when you started seeming confused at family gatherings, Ashley always had an explanation that sounded perfectly reasonable. She'd say you were stressed, that you needed more rest. I started going to therapy with a psychologist who specialized in trauma, Dr. Martin. She was a woman in her 50s with gentle but piercing eyes who helped me process the sheer magnitude of what I had survived. What you experienced was systematic domestic abuse, she explained during our third session. The fact that it came from your daughter-in-law instead of a romantic partner doesn't make it any less traumatic. Sometimes I feel like I'm overreacting, I admitted. At the end of the day, she didn't physically hit me. Rose, the doctor said firmly. She drugged you without your consent for months. She stole your money, isolated you from your family, and destroyed your self-confidence. That is abuse. The psychological trauma is just as real as the physical. The sessions helped me understand that it hadn't been my fault, that there weren't signs I should have seen earlier. Ashley was an expert manipulator who had fooled not only me, but Daniel and probably others in her past. Daniel and I started having deeper conversations during his weekly visits to Carol's house. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship. He started individual therapy as well, working to understand how he had been manipulated and how to prevent it from ever happening again. I've been thinking about selling the house, he told me during one of these talks. I can't live there anymore. Every room reminds me of what happened. And what will you do? I want to move into a smaller apartment, and I want to give you half the money from the sale of the house. I know it doesn't make up for what you lost, but it's a start. It was a meaningful gesture, but I knew my relationship with Daniel would never be exactly the same as before. There was a crack that, while it could heal, would always be there as a reminder of what had happened. A month after Ashley's arrest, I got an unexpected call from Detective Davis, who had been handling the case. Rose, I thought you should know that Ashley pleaded guilty to all charges. There won't be a trial. I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me had wanted to face her in court. I had wanted her to publicly answer for what she had done. But another part was grateful not to have to relive everything on a witness stand. What will her sentence be? I asked. Probably between 5 and 8 years, depending on the judge. She'll also have to pay restitution for the stolen money. When I hung up, I sat in Carol's garden and cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of liberation. The darkest chapter of my life was finally coming to a close, but I knew the real work of healing was just beginning. 6 months after the day that changed my life forever, I was standing in the doorway of my new home. It wasn't just a different house. It was the symbol of a completely new woman, a woman who had survived systematic poisoning, family betrayal, and had emerged not just intact, but stronger than before. The small condo at the Meadows condominiums had 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen that overlooked the community garden, and most importantly, it was completely mine. Every penny of the down payment had come from the money recovered from Ashley and the sale of Daniel's house. For the first time in 2 years, I relied on no one but myself. Carol helped me decorate, but this time, I made all the decisions. Bright colors instead of the neutral tones Ashley had insisted were more appropriate for my age. Plants in every corner because they brought me joy. Photos of my grandchildren in gold frames because I wanted constant reminders of the good things in life. You look radiant, Carol told me as we hung yellow curtains in the living room, like you've dropped 10 years. And it was true. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the Rose from before the poison, but with something extra, a hard-earned wisdom and an inner strength I never knew I possessed. My relationship with Daniel had healed enough that we could have weekly dinners without either of us walking on eggshells. He had sold the house, as promised, and given me $45,000 from his share. More importantly, he had started seeing me as the strong woman I had always been, rather than the fragile victim Ashley had created in his mind. "Mom," he said to me during one of our dinners, "I want you to know I've been reading up on psychological manipulation. I understand better now how Ashley controlled both of us. And what have you learned?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That people like her look for empathetic victims. They look for people who want to believe the best in others, who are willing to sacrifice for their family. She used your love for me against you, and my love for you against me. It was a mature observation that filled me with hope for our future. My other 2 children, Mark and Ellen, had come to visit me as soon as they found out what had happened. They both felt terribly guilty for not being more present, for having accepted Daniel's explanations about my decline without questioning them. "I always thought Daniel had you covered," Mark admitted. "I figured because you lived with him, you were better taken care of than if you lived alone. And I was so caught up in my own problems," Ellen added, "that when Daniel said you were having memory issues, I just accepted it as part of getting older." I forgave them both immediately. Unlike Daniel, they hadn't been present during the daily poisoning. Their only flaw had been assuming their older brother had everything under control. Therapy with Dr. Martin continued to be essential to my recovery. We had moved from talking about the trauma to talking about the future. "What do you want to do with the rest of your life, Rose?" she asked me during a session. "You have energy. You have your health. You have financial independence. The world is open to you." It was a question I had been asking myself. At 64, I felt like I was starting a brand new life. There were things I had always wanted to do but had put off due to family responsibilities. I decided to take painting classes at the community center, something I had loved in high school but abandoned when I got married young. My fingers remembered the pleasure of creating something beautiful out of nothing, of expressing emotions that words couldn't quite capture. I also joined a support group for domestic abuse survivors. At first, I felt out of place. Most of the other women had suffered physical violence from romantic partners, but I soon realized that abuse takes many forms, and my experience could help other older women who might be facing manipulation from family members. "My daughter-in-law almost convinced me I was crazy," I shared during my first meeting. "If it hadn't been for a perceptive doctor, I'd still be taking those pills, believing I had dementia." After the meeting, 3 women approached me. One was worried about her son-in-law, who controlled all the finances for her and her daughter. Another suspected her son was giving her the wrong medications. The third had noticed she only ever felt confused when her granddaughter visited. I realized I had a responsibility to share my story, to help other women recognize the signs I had overlooked. 3 months after moving into my new home, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Ashley, writing from the state prison where she was serving her 7-year sentence. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash without opening it, but something made me stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was my need to have the last word. The letter was surprisingly brief. "Rose, I know you will probably never forgive me, and I understand why. What I did was unforgivable. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that what happened wasn't about you. You were a good mother-in-law, a good person. My problem was with myself, with my need to control everything because I was terrified of not being enough. Daniel loves you and always has. I hope you can heal and be happy. Ashley." I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't forgive her, and I probably never completely would, but there was a certain peace in knowing she finally understood the sheer magnitude of what she had done. A year into my new life, Daniel showed up to our weekly dinner with news. "Mom, there's something I want to tell you. I've been seeing someone." My heart tightened for a fraction of a second, the old fears bubbling up. "Really?" "Her name is Patty. She's a nurse at the hospital where I work. We've been taking it slow, dating for about 3 months. He paused. "I want you to meet her, but only when you feel comfortable. And I want you to know that this time, I'm doing things differently. This time, if you ever feel like something is wrong, I want you to tell me immediately." Looking at him there, vulnerable but determined, I saw the man I had raised before Ashley corrupted him. "I would love to meet Patty," I told him. "But Daniel, I need you to promise me something. Whatever it is, promise me you will never again put another person's word above mine when it comes to my well-being. Promise me that if I ever doubt anything, you will at least listen before dismissing my concerns." "I promise you, Mom. I give you my word." And this time, looking into his clear, honest eyes, I believed him. That night, as I got ready for bed in my own room, in my own house, I reflected on the journey I had taken. I had started as a victim, confused and poisoned, doubting my own mind, but I had ended up a survivor, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her life. Not everything was perfectly back to normal. I would probably always carry a tiny scar of distrust when it came to new people in my life. And my relationship with Daniel, though healed, had a new dynamic that included much clearer boundaries and mutual respect. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, with the sound of the night breeze gently rustling the yellow curtains I had chosen myself, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete peace. I had survived, I had thrived, and I had learned the most important lesson of all: that it is never too late to take back your own life, no matter who tries to steal it from you.